Hello, hello. Lovely to be here with those of you who can be here live. And as always, anyone who is watching the replay, I'm always happy to hear your comments as well, and your questions and your shares, and then continue the dialogue in written form. Who's laughing at me? Are you laughing because I'm rolling my sleeves up? All right, welcome. Welcome to those of you who are joining live. I'm having kind of a weird hair day, so anyway, I'll just stop futzing with it now. And I really wanted to, so I was saying to anybody who's watching the replay, of course, bring in your questions, your comments, and I'll engage with you there. But this applies also, of course, to all of you who are here live. I say this every time, but it's always worth repeating, which is just how much I love the dialogue, no matter what the topic is with the conversation. Really appreciate when you bring in your personal experiences and your shares about the topic. And of course, always really interested in whatever questions you have or clarifications. So today, this has been up for me, for a long time, but it's been up for me personally lately. And then also I was having a conversation just recently with a woman friend of mine, and really this piece again just felt very, very alive around what does this actually look like to create space inside, especially our intimate relationships. I think, certainly we need space in our family. We need space from friends. We just need space sometimes, right? It's not even like about a specific person. It's just like, in fact, that's probably one of the important pieces to note here, even in relation to intimate relationships, is like if I need space 80%, maybe 90% of the time, actually, it's not like I need space from you. It's just like, I just need space. I need a little breathing room. I need to clear my head. So I think that might be one of the first important things to remember as the partner who might be hearing that or on the receiving end of somebody needing space. It's like, oh, right. This probably doesn't have anything to do with me. And even if it does, it still doesn't have to be so like personal. So yeah, I'm just feeling like where to specifically start with this. I think I'll start in the space. My guess is that everyone watching this, again, whether you're live or watching the replay, like most people, if you say something about space and relationships, people are like, oh yeah, that's really important. Like space is really important in relationships. There's this, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there's this beautiful Khalil Gibran, I'm always afraid I'm saying it wrong, but quote about let there be spaces in your togetherness. And I swear, I haven't been to a wedding in the last 10 years that didn't use that quote in its wedding ceremony. So it's like people get it. And that's just like, that's the space of an insight and understanding, intellectual understanding, like, yeah, that makes sense. And then there's the practicality of it. And so, one of the reasons I want to talk about it today is like, hey, so let's look at like, how do we actually practice this? How do we bring this into our relationships? I might think like, of course I want to give my partner space. And then the minute that he's like, I need a little space, I'm like, oh my God, don't leave me. I'm sure nobody can relate. The only one. So letting go in a way, frankly, of the part of you that's like, yeah, I totally understand that this is really important. And actually looking at, well, do you practice this? Do you practice it in terms of actually creating that for yourself? And do you practice it as something that you not only can accept or honor in your partner, but even like give them as a gift? I did a piece probably 3 years ago where I'm not going to go super into it now, but maybe I'll link to it in the comments, but of exploring whether maybe space was the sixth love language. And part of my exploration in that was really this idea of like, I think of the love languages not only of like, oh, this how can I get this, but is looking at our partner and really thinking like, how can I express my love to them in a way where they will feel loved? And I have noticed with my partner, for instance, that actually he feels loved. And there have been other men in my life, and it mostly is men. Although, you know, I think we all as human beings like need a little space, but that actually feel loved when we can kind of actually give them space as a gift, like show them our love by not always moving in. And that's kind of this other piece I wanted to touch on, which is, you know, I think that it's like, this is a tendency in general, but is that there's a certain evolution, and it is an evolution. Things are getting better, but often, you know, in like spiral dynamics or like integral theory, we'll talk about how it's really natural to reject the phase that you just came from. And so I've sort of watched this in what I would call kind of the personal growth world, or, you know, there's so much new information about relationship and attachment, and, you know, some of that's not like so new, but it has a big upsurging in the cultural awareness right now. We're understanding these things. There's a lot more books on relationship and intimacy and how to do it well. And it is an incredible body of work, you know, like that exists out there, and it's all better. And one of the things that I have noticed inside that body of work is that there is often either an overt or a very subtle pathologizing of the one who needs space, or the one who's putting some distance. That's labeled more as the avoidant, or like fear of commitment, or what, you know, I don't, you could throw out some of the ones. What do you know? Like, what do we call these people? And again, it's usually men. It's usually like he's ... And I'm not saying that in every circumstance where that's used, it's inaccurate, but I'm saying it's interesting to notice that across the board, that tends to be the language that we use around that kind of behavior, the behavior that says I need some space, or that languaging. And I just want to check what Nikki said here, because she said, I can't watch because the girls are coming home. She said, lots of space and good sex are two of the most important things in a relationship. I love that. I actually think that they're really interconnected. And it's not because like you have to be apart in order to be drawn to each other. But often there is this, I think they talk about, right, like absence makes the heart grow fonder, and there is that sense of like creating the space for good sex often comes from also creating some space. So I believe, and this is a much bigger topic that I just want to drop into this one, because this one is really around space inside a relationship and intimacy. But I actually see this as part of a trend to pathologize the masculine. And I don't mean men, although it sometimes maps over to men, both in terms of the action of it and the pathologizing of it. But I mean pathologizing the masculine, as in it's the masculine part of any of us that wants space. And both in its positive forms and in its less evolved forms, as it were. So it's often seen, for instance, if you do take a man-woman relationship and the woman's the one who always wants to work on the relationship and talk it out and process and like come forward when there's an issue, and the man's like, whoa, I need some space. We'll often look at that scenario and we'll say like, she's more committed to the relationship. She's doing all the work, you know, he's leaving, he's avoiding, and I think that's a certain kind of pathologizing of the masculine. So just kind of drop that in and set it to the side. But one of the things I want to look at in actually this space today, and again, I really welcome your questions. I welcome your shares about your own personal life or your personal experiences, both in places where this has been frustrating and also where you've really succeeded, you know, and you're like, let's celebrate it here and bring it forward so other people can also learn from that. Is one of the things that I would say about that is that I know for myself, I've really watched this inside my own self, you know, for probably the last 10 years, fairly consciously, 10 or 15 years. But it's like there's this subtlety that I've really tapped into in the last probably 3 to 5 years of noticing in my own self the place where actually I'll use moving towards actually comes from the same place of anxiety that moving away could come from. That they're two different responses that different people or even the same person in a different moment could have, but that actually comes from the same kind of anxiety point. So, and I think, you know, to acknowledge we do have terminology for that as well, like we call women needy and things like that. But I think, again, in the more, that's like in the more social sphere, but in the more psychological or personal growth sphere, there's a more like codification of the pathologization of distance. And I want to call a little bit of bullshit on that. And I am, again, not saying that every time a person has pulled away or pushed away or needed space, that it's not coming from fear or it's not coming from anxiety or it's not coming as an avoidance mechanism. It absolutely sometimes is. And I would say probably in almost equal measure, so are the times that I or you or we, like a person has moved forward out of anxiety or out of fear, that I would say that they're probably relatively equal. And so really looking at that, I had an experience recently actually where my partner and I have now, I mean, we have a very circuitous relationship that I won't go into here, but we've been really solidly committed to a path of partnership for just over 2 years now. And it's, you know, it's really been this real deepening of like intimacy and vulnerability. And I know, I mean, partly because he says it, and also I can feel it, and I know him, and I know his history and these things, that is tender for him. And so I've really watched him. I mean, I've watched him for the like almost 8 years or so that I've known him. There's a certain way that he can come close and then move far away, and then come close and then move far away. And again, I would say, I don't want to get too personal on him because he's not here to share his side of the story, but I would say, like, in some sense, yes, this is coming from his childhood wounding. But is that always such a bad thing? Like, I've also really watched the way that that's a modulation. That he comes in close, and there's a certain point, it's like, oh, actually, in order to modulate, in order to hold this, like, I actually need to take a little space. And then I've just watched him come back. And for my own nervous system, it's actually been extraordinary to sit with that experience and experience his returning. And again, this is a generalization. I think it's a fair one. I'm certainly not saying that it's across the board and it never goes the other way. But I see it more with women, where that feeling, like what comes up when somebody moves away from us, is like the, you know, are they going to ever come back? Am I alone forever? In just the littlest movement away. And actually, we never give room for the returning if we always come forward like as soon as they move back, if we always come forward, we actually don't give room for that returning, which has, it's really extraordinary, this kind of nourishing quality that it's had on my nervous system. Anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent. It was this long way of saying that now, very recently, my partner and I are in the process of moving in together. And it's a really big deal. I mean, it's a big deal for both of us, frankly. Like we've lived separately, and like I've lived on my own, but with my children, right? Which is its own thing. But for like 8 years, he's lived alone for longer than that. We're very set in our routines. There's a lot that's actually been incredibly healthy and wonderful about having these separate spaces that we get to go to, and the way we get to set up our lives. And also we're looking at bringing a whole family together. So that's a big deal. We have two children to consider here, and they have a lot of energy. And, I take up a lot of space, like just energetically, and he's really, really just big. So he takes up a lot of space. It's like a thing, right? And I think we're both feeling, okay, what's this going to take, and how are we going to work with it? And then also he did a really big thing and came with me to a Tantra workshop, which is like not his scene. And I don't even know it's totally my scene, but it's way more my scene than his scene. And we spent a ton of time around other people. And we're both introverts, but he is like me times 10. And then he met some of my friends, and he met some of my colleagues, and it was like a lot packed into 3 days. And we came home, and we had this super kind of intimate thing that happened as we were coming home. And then he kind of jetted. And I felt that part of me. It was like, oh my God, I pushed too hard, and now he's gone, and it's over. And, I watched my mind partly do its own spiral thing, but I also watched my body mind, as it were, like my energetic space and my actual physicality have its response. And at this point, partly in relation to him, I have this practice, but also just with my own body, where there really is another way that is not like believing everything that your body mind is telling you, or me, right? But also is not suppressing it and squashing it down and even trying to, like, frankly, the way that we try to talk ourselves out of things, like, it's okay, I know he's coming back, and is actually a way of squashing down. And it often seems like, sorry, I'm getting distracted by my hair. It often seems like those are the only two options, right? Either I need to like kind of squash it, even if I'm calling it self-soothing, but there's a way of going like, don't feel that. That's too much. Or it's crazy, or you're needy, or who knows what all the reasons you tell yourself that you should squash it down, or like, oh my God, it's true, and I really need to do something about this. And I watched both sides of that happen inside myself. And I did a lot of expression in like my own, I did a lot of movement, some of it, in terms of like dance or sound expression, some of it very, like sometimes our body just need to like get its stuff kind of out, and it has these weird things it needs to do. And so I did a lot of that. I did a lot of, I just let myself cry when I needed to cry. I did a lot of breathing, but I also allowed, it was like I loved both of us. And this is, I want to generalize it just from my own particular situation, but I think that's really the practice. It's like, how do you love both of you in those moments? Like, just love who he is as a being. And, when I'm wanting something, how do I want him to relate to it, even if it's uncomfortable for him? And can I relate to what it is that he's needing, even if it's uncomfortable for me? Can I offer the kind of love that I would want to receive?
Mama, I need a snack for you when I need to cook it.
Okay, I'll be right there.
Okay, what side is on?
Do not turn on the oven or the stove. Here, you get to witness parenting in action. Yara, you may not. So, coming back to this piece is, can I hold him in that same love, and myself. Can I hold myself? Like, I don't need to reject either of us in order for the situation to make sense or to be right, or it's like it's just happening. And be able to actually give. And he actually told me, he was like, I need some space. And then, oh, can I give that actually as like a gift? He's letting me know. And frankly, 8 years ago when we met, I wouldn't have heard I need some space. He would just, I just wouldn't have heard from him for 2 or 3 weeks. And even to recognize, so this is both in the realm of how can you receive someone who is wanting space. You're laughing about my kid interruption. And how can we offer it in a way that's a gift?
Move this around.
Okay.
Here's your snack with salt.
Thank you, my love. Was, okay, I gotta like get centered back in what I was saying. Right. So this is in like practicality. How do we actually practice this? Was that it took some attention on my part, but this capacity to see that he was actually reaching out. It was actually an act of coming forward, an act of connection that would have him say, I need some space. That act is an act of connection. Not, even though what he's asking for is space, the act itself is not disconnection. When someone comes forward and says like, hey, I need some space. And so that's a tip. For instance, if you're wanting space, is can you come forward in your request? And I also know from a lot of people that I work with, and again, this is both men and women, but I really hear it from women, this desire to receive this from the men in their lives, especially when they're intimate relationship with men, is if you can create any kind of a container around that. Like, I'm really needing some space. And you probably won't hear from me for a couple days, but I promise I'll be in touch after that. Or maybe you live together, right? You're definitely going to see each other. It's like, I need to go take some space, but I will check in with you tonight. I'm not available for this conversation right now, but let me get back to you in an hour, or let me get back to you by the end of the day. And when there's that sense of like, oh, they've let me know when they're going to come back, it doesn't mean that we don't still have some anxiety to work through on our own, like our own stuff, but it gives us something to relax into. So that's in the realm of practicality. And that each, like, being willing to receive those things actually as like acts of generosity from the partner who needs space. So again, my partner was basically just like, I just need to like kind of check out. And then he wanted to have a conversation with me on the phone, and I said, please, can we talk in person? So it's not just like, okay, I'll just take whatever and I'll just deal with my anxiety over here, and either there's modulation in there. But I knew he really didn't want to come over. Like, his system was really fritzing out, and he like didn't want to come over. And I really did. Like, I could just feel, I was like, if we so this brings in another piece, which is how we can actually give each other energetic space even when we're together. So we have the capacity to even be in the same space. I was like, please come over and let's have this conversation in person. He said, okay, I'll be over at 7. And that in and of itself, again, I was just like, he's like, how generous when his system is saying like, I don't want to, I want to run for the hills. Everything in my system from the time I was very young is telling me that I should run for the hills right now. But actually, I'm going to trust this person. I'm going to trust this woman enough to come in, even when I want to run for the hills. But then on my side, there's the capacity actually to hold some energetic space when we're together, so that it doesn't feel like, oh my God, I'm so glad you're here, and like, now I can breathe again, which is a little terrifying when your system is wanting to retreat. So it actually allows a being whose energetic body needs more space to trust you when they can come closer and you can hold your own space a little bit. That actually allows that other being to trust, like, oh, actually I am safe in the space of this other person, this other body, this other energetic space. Often the beings that need space are actually the most sensitive. Sometimes they come across as like, because they're so guarded, but they're often the most sensitive. So I got a little derailed partly by my daughter, who just brought me a pan full of bread with salt. And then I think I went on a tangent there. So the part I want to come back to is also just to reiterate this piece of that absolutely sometimes when people take space, it's coming from pathology, or it's coming from old childhood wounds, or it's coming from avoidance. First thing I would say is, so is our like intense need to be close is also a lot of times coming from pathology, coming from childhood wound, coming from anxiety and fear. And just because that's the case doesn't mean that it's bad and wrong. Either one, right? We can develop tools around it. We can develop all these kinds of capacities. We can love ourselves better. We can accept each other with, it's like, yeah, fuck, man. You got that childhood wound and I've got this one. What are we gonna do? Because you know what? I've had mine for 40 years and you've had yours for 45, and we're doing the best we can and we're gonna keep working on it. But you know, there's probably some piece of this that I'm going to have till the day I die. So can we love each other anyway? And I want to just bring that piece. Thank you, my love. Just want to bring that piece in as like partly a way of being gentle with yourself, and then also being gentle with other people inside of that as well. So one of the things that we can do as perhaps the partner who desires less space or more often wants the closeness is think about how good it feels when your partner is the one who comes in. Like, so I'm going to use the kind of the pronoun he and she for simplicity right now. It's not always across the board, but just for simplicity. So I'm going to say, like, if she wants closeness, like how good it feels to her if he is like, hey babe, here I am. What, you know, like, would you like to tell me about your day? Or like, what can I hear? How can I be with you? If he actually comes in and brings it and she doesn't have to go get it, how good does that feel? So we actually have the same capacity if we're the partner who wants more closeness and we know our partner needs space. Imagine how good it would feel to them if we relieve them of the burden of having to be the one to take it. This capacity, like, hey babe, here's some space. Would you like to like have the evening alone? Like, it seems like if we took a little space, or how about I just handle the kids tonight, and actually give that space as a gift. Or when our partner comes and says like, I'm really, you know, I'm overwhelmed right now, I don't know how to handle all the things, or there's like, great. But, you know, for my partner, again, it's like, go for a surf tonight. Like, go rock climbing this afternoon. You need a mountain bike ride. Like I know the things he needs. You know the things they need. And it's usually not processing with you for an hour. It's like not the thing that's going to support their nervous system. Now, what I would, and when they come back, don't punish them for it. That's actually really important. So one of the things we're like, fine, yeah, go ahead. You can go for a surf. It's fine. I'll take care of the kids. And then they come back and you just punish them for it. That's not really a gift. So like, don't do that. Now, what I would say, and again, I'm using the pronouns here kind of generally and liberally, and it's not intended to be rock solid, as it were. But men, how do I want to say this? It's a couple things. One is, it's great your partner could give you this space, but also it is part of your responsibility to know when you need space and to say, I need some space. I'm going to go, I'm just going to say what my partner does. I don't know what you do, but like, I'm going to go for a hike. I'm going to go take a rock climb. I need a surf tonight. And do that before you get super resentful. It's not fair. It's not fair to your partner or your family or the people in your life when you're like, oh, I have to be here. I have to be here. I never get any space when you're not taking it. And then the other thing that I see a lot is that men they'll like sort of take space, but they won't actually nourish themselves. They'll like do something, but they'll like take space in the garage, but they'll do some project on the house. And they're alone, but they haven't actually nourished themselves. Or they'll, I don't know, they'll just do other things, and then they'll come back still resentful. And, your family or your partner or they're looking around, they're like, what? Like, I gave you this, like I said, go take care of yourself, and then you didn't do it, and now you're mad at me. And that's just not fair. So those are like, in terms of like the actual practicality, it's really important if you're the one who needs space, that when you take it, do your best. I mean, we're all going to fail sometimes, but just do your best to actually nourish yourself and then be able to come back more full, like ready to meet the people in your life who want to be met. I think about, this also falls under the realm of like, real high level game. But I had a partner one time, it was when we were like on a vacation together. So we were really, in close with each other the whole time. And at some point he was like, look, I want to bring myself with a certain kind of energy and integrity when I'm with you. There's a high level of being that I want to bring to you. And in order to be able to do that, I really need to take off right now. And I still had freaking anxiety. This is the thing, is like, also, and I'll just use men as a catch-all here, but like men, number one, it's not your fault if she still feels anxious or hurt, but don't take it personally and don't judge her for it. She also just has her own nervous system. Like, I still felt this part that was like, he doesn't want to be with me 24/7. And there it is, like, just, okay, no biggie. Like, I have that feeling come up. But I also, in hearing him say that, I was like, oh, it's actually, he's giving himself a gift, but he's actually also wanting to give me a gift. There's a certain kind of attention he wants to give me, and it takes some energy. And that's not an insult. It's not like, oh my God, it's so hard to be with you. I gotta get out of here. Basically like, oh, it's an acknowledgement. It actually takes a certain kind of energy to be with you, with the kind of presence that I want to bring to you. And I need to go replenish myself. I need to go lie in the woods in silence. I need to go sit by a river. I need to go meditate. I need to go do these things. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to check in on the comments here and also sort of check my notes and see if I hit all the things, because I definitely got derailed today. And in this time, this is a great time if you have your own personal experiences and shares, or there's any questions about anything I've said, or about how this relate to your personal relationship and actual experience, and like, yeah, but how would I do it here? I love those questions. And then I'm going to wrap it up here, because as you can see, my children are apparently starving. Well, Linda, I'm glad you like my tangents. Hi. You're going to give me 2 minutes, my love, okay? Yes, Joseph, I think this piece around non-judgment, it's really, Pema Chodron uses this phrase, and I really love it, which is unconditional friendliness. And it's absolutely, we want to bring that towards other people, but there's also this real value in, can I bring unconditional friendliness towards all parts of myself? Right? Like the part of me that's scared, the part of me that's angry, the part of me that's needy, the part of me that's anxious, the part of me that wants to push you away, the part of me that wants to hold you tight and never let you. Can I be just unconditional? It doesn't mean believing them or acting on them, but it's like, can I be unconditionally friendly towards all those parts of myself? Amy, yeah, you've seen that a lot, the house projects that never end. I know. My partner has that too. And I have to say, I really have to practice not telling him to stop. And, you know, like some of that is just trusting that there's something in that that's like really important. I mean, I do think that's like, it's his house and it's his domain and he loves it. And he put in like a whole fucking ceiling, did all the paint. Like he built a deck. It's kind of like, part of me is like, you're amazing. And then there's another part where he'll be like, oh, I've got so much work to do. And I'm like, you know, you're creating that work. But there are those real gentle pieces. I mean, I know I said this piece about like, hey, go for a surf, or hey, do these things, but there's really a different way of like releasing our partners and kind of as like a gift. And then there's like telling them what to do. Like you're, you know, da 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 da, and this is what you need to do. And it's actually, frankly, more useful often to just like, hey babe, you know, I got all the space in the world for you to take a surf today or whatever. And but then like release it. Because I do have to stop myself from really not like, I'm like, don't resent me for the freaking new ceiling you decided to put in the house. Like, I didn't ask you to do that. And just let him have his process about it. But I will, you know, like hearing you say that again, Amy, is just reiterate this piece around where if you're a being who needs space, and frankly, I am one of them. I mean, it's less than my partner, but I do need space and I need it to be silent. But I do this too. Like I'll be like, I need space. And then I'll go to a coffee shop and I'll like be on Facebook, and then I'm just crankier. And if I was truly going to nourish myself, you know, I would go lie down under a tree, or I would sit by the ocean, or I would find a place to go dance, or I would, you know, like we actually, I think we do know, right, how to actually give to ourselves so we can meet our lives more fully. And that's really what the need, like ultimately that part of us is like, I need some space. It's like, if there's some way that I need to be rejuvenated so that I can meet my life more fully. So last couple of minutes here, just to hear if there are any lingering shares or lingering curiosities, so that I don't miss them. And as always, I really appreciate all of you who are here live and stuck with me through both my ramblings and the distractions. And I always enjoy the conversation. And to any of you who are watching the replay, thank you for your time and attention. And I would love to hear anything that you have to say, and I'll come back in. I will say, especially on the replay, it's really helpful if you can give a little bit more context, because I'm not always sure what I'm saying. Like as you're watching, sometimes you can just give comments, but I'm not really sure what I said at, 15 minutes and 6 seconds. So a little bit of context around questions and shares is really, really valuable. I think the last piece I'll say before I sign off here, I was trying to give you all some space in case you had something to say, but the last piece I'll say is actually to go back to this piece around energetic space. Because often, I talked about it much more in these slightly more dramatic examples, right, of someone actually saying like, I need space, and then our capacity to actually give that, or to, do what we need to do, or these different pieces. But this is part of like that piece I said at the beginning around like pathologizing. We pathologize the one who wants space, which again, I really do believe this is part of this way we really subtly pathologize the masculine aspects in all of us. And through that we pathologize men and men's way of relating. Men, like what men need in intimacy. And sort of the realm of intimacy is like overwhelmed by the feminine. Which it's great. We also need to know what the feminine needs, but it's a little tricky when it gets kind of pathologized in that way. But even energetically, often that'll happen. Like, right, you'll be in the house together, you'll be in the same room, you'll even be out to dinner. In fact, I remember, I mean, this is different because it was in the realm of a workshop space, but I remember this man and the people who were in the small group that we were working with, they like wanted his presence, and he would just needed to look away every once in a while. And I could tell that like inside himself, he was pathologizing himself. It was kind of coming from outside. They were like, like, where are you going? Or why can't you stay with me? Or these kinds of things. And then he was taking it on like, oh my God, I should be able to just stay like present forever without ever needing to break eye contact. And I could put my hand on his knee and I was like, hey, try this, like, be in eye contact. And then the first moment that you start to feel that impulse or that something arises, like, say like, just give me a minute. And then look away and take a breath and then come back. So again, that takes a lot of self-awareness for somebody who needs space, but it can be practiced. But that, like you've let the person know you're there, you're not leaving, and you're not leaving for good. You're going to come, can you just give me a second? But even those little micro moments, again, I'll say I see men need this more than women. So not to say that there aren't women, that women don't need it, or there aren't women who need it more than men, but I see more men who need this more often. But even that capacity to like be out to dinner and just kind of like take a little energetic space for like a minute and then come back. There's a way to let her know, or your partner. But as partners, there's also a way for us to feel that moment and like rest back. And so often, so this is where it takes practice and awareness on our part. So often we feel the little part of him that just like he's been right there. And then there's like this little moment where he, looks away or he gets distracted or something. And we're like, what was that? Oh my God, like, where did you go? And we just try to grab it back. And that's if it happens like that, like, frankly, that's just from our own neuroses and anxiety. And so it's like noticing the part of us that wants to grab it back, give ourselves like that moment to rest back and breathe. And then like, hey, babe, I want your attention, or like, where did you go? So I went on a whole other tangent there. Linda, why at times do you think we don't give ourselves the permission and the space to nourish ourselves? Is it out of a sense of guilt? Well, I see that for women a lot. I'm not sure what this is. I've actually been in some voicemail dialogues with some mom friends of mine, and I'm like, what is this thing? Like, what is this martyr complex that we would feel it's like something so intense about being like, I hired childcare so I could take a nap, or like and then to say that out loud to like other mothers, it's like this thing. So, but why do we do that? I also think another reason, frankly, is that we're afraid of, we in the global sense, but we're just afraid of just being with ourselves. And some of that is like because we actually can feel a little bit what's there. But a lot of times it's just the unknown. We've done it so infrequently that we're like, I don't know what's going to be there. And it's like Pandora's box. Like if I just open that, I have no idea what's going to come out. And it's just like fear of the unknown. But most of us, and frankly, I think I can speak for most people because I am pretty sure that I spend more time being with myself than your average monkey. And I'm still like anxious about it. So I don't think that it's crazy of me to assert that most humans are really working with some anxiety around simply being with ourselves. And some of that, frankly, I think it's like some of this is intentional, some of it's just happened, but the way that our culture happens, like I remember I was pumping gas the other day. This was actually a couple of years ago that I had the first realization, but I still notice it. And there's like ads on gas pumps. And I was like, that didn't exist when I was a kid. You could, there just wasn't like the realm of stimulation, even, 30, 40 years ago. And I live in a pretty small town, but you figure you're living in a big city, like the realm of stimulation that's just coming all the time. I realized this when I was down in LA working a couple of years ago too. I was just like, oh my God, there's freaking music in the bathroom. Like, can we really not, I know we take our cell phones into the bathroom now too, but like, can we not go pee without being entertained? And then you can't sit at the bar without there being a TV. Usually there's like 2 or 3 TVs, right? Somewhere like there's just this sense of stimulation, whether we want it or not. And so we become incredibly unaccustomed to it. That's a whole other thing. At that time, I was like, if I ever start a chain of hotels, they're going to be silent. Like there's going to be no TVs. There's going to be little, like fountains, you know, with like rocks and water. And there's going to be no music playing in the bathrooms. There's going to be no music in the elevators. It's going to be amazing. Like people will come to my hotels because they want to be somewhere quiet. I'm probably never going to start hotels, but somebody else, please go do that because I will pay good money to stay in your hotel. Miriam said, overwhelmed by feminine demands. When I understood who was in front of me, it changed. Men are different that way. I'm not totally sure what that middle piece means about when I understood who was in front of me. But, you know, frankly, men and women feel overwhelmed by feminine demands. It's just, you know, the feminine just is like, let's do more and more and more and more and more. And that's the feminine in all of us. And it's delightful. You know, it's totally delightful. And it can be overwhelming. It's both. It's both. So I'm glad you would like my hotel, Morag. Okay, so I am going to sign off now. I'm going to feed my children lunch. Again, just gratitude for being here, for your attention, for all your shares and your questions. And I look forward to more.